Welcome to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and middle treatment. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am here with my disembodied co-host, Bob Schlehuber. Trust me, he is indeed here. We have another great show for you today. We'll start by delving into the interesting races where lefties are challenging entrenched structures of the Democratic Party, specifically the Cori Bush and the Jamal Bowman race. We'll also discuss the disgusting optics and politics behind white nationalist President Donald Trump intentionally holding his racist hate rallies at locations across the United States to coincide with dates of atrocities against African Americans. Don't tell me that this man is not racist. This is in direct repudiation to what he considers to be Black Lives Matter protests and support by the larger masses. A little later, we'll move from depravity to euphoric incompetence, with 35 million people not receiving their stimulus checks. We'll also get into the bit of foreign policy, with Russia warning that it will take rational actions against weapons being deposited in Poland. There's also the awkward case of the United States attacking the International Criminal Court as it investigates that same United States for war crimes. Love the court when it's locking up podunk dictators in Africa, but now that it's looking into our actions, it requires sanctions. Very interesting. In the second hour, we'll keep the energy going with Trump's response to Black Lives Matter call to defund the police, with work on an executive order to, you guessed it, increase funding for the police. I'd call it astonishing, but as I've argued for weeks, there is a fundamental problem in your government, both administrations, both parties. Neither acts rationally to the demands and the wants of the public. There's no voting solution to this problem. Trump, and for that matter, Biden, are just symptoms. Last but not least, it's Friday. That means the hardest segment on the network. Come at me, bro. Do you feel strong? Do you got something on your chest? This is your day. This is your moment. This is your plunk, constant, instant to make your point. We have a good subject for debate: the shaming of the Minneapolis mayor on the issue of defunding the police, whether it's correct to go on Fox, and redemption. Is it possible? The redemption was something that I've argued and debated with myself for a while on, so this should be a really good conversation. But let's start here. The New York Times, often a day late and a dollar short, in this instance, has picked up on a fascinating trend that has spread across the United States in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests. The organic uprising of people deciding that icons in American history and their ever-present reverence expressed in stone and location were offensive abominations that good conscience demanded be torn down. Even in my home of Richmond, Virginia, they pulled down a Columbus statue and chucked him into the river, with the media given, you could call it implicit approval just in the way they covered the story. Now, this is not an argument per se based on legal justification. Under the view of law, there is no defense. But law is not real. Law is just a point of view that is backed by force. There is a difference between that being a cosmic reality versus the legal framework to which is being structured. This is not an issue, my point is, on correctness of law. This is an issue on the issue of conscience. Now, I personally was late to this, misshapen by living in Richmond, Virginia, driving past these monuments without a second thought. The familiarity was something that, for the most part, when I saw this, even I had this notion of, certain degree of pang. For those that have these type of plagues, I do get it. I would submit, though, that the quirk is one of familiarity. An honest appraisal. If you really looked at this, would you tolerate a statue of Hitler because it kept the trains running on time, or because the economy was somewhat decent in the beginning under Hitler? Or was the fact that he murdered all of those people, does that matter more? Understand what I'm asking you for the moment. I know you may take pains with that. You don't necessarily like that picture. That picture is indeed what we are dealing with. Columbus was responsible for the savage murder of millions, let alone instigator in the near destruction of a civilization that was eventually codified into law to give legitimacy to the theft and to the murder. The same American law that we are arguing about right now. The Confederates were a band of terrorists that tried to topple the U.S. government, screaming about their freedoms, to hold other human beings as property. Statues all up and down the street. We love our monsters. That's the honest truth. We love our monsters. They're familiar to us. They don't seem like monsters to us because they are our monsters. George Bush was responsible for the deaths of millions. That shoe that was thrown with that righteous bitterness should have hit him square between the eyes. That would have been the least that could have been done. And yet, liberals love him. Nancy Pelosi said that she knew that he was lying. Didn't stop her from avoiding what he was doing, nor did it push her to impeach him after the fact. No, she impeached Trump. George Bush was responsible for the death of millions of Iraqis, let alone thousands of Americans, and we're still in those wars today. Every death that is racked up is one on his conscience to which he is culpable for getting us in the Middle East in the first place. We love our monsters. The statues are nice. And when the New York Times is pointing this out as an issue of overturning white supremacy, the statues are nice, I get it. But you miss the point. You entirely miss the point. Even the defund the police thing is too diminutive for the moment. Yes, it's nice, but it kind of goes askew. Now, Biden, regardless of it being too diminutive, the fact is that if it is too diminutive, it should be an easy ask. It should be the least that you can give from the standpoint of your political system. Biden says kick rocks. Trump says kick rocks. What does Nancy Pelosi says? Let's hear Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi takes a knee for 9 minutes. Shocking that she can do that. Takes a knee for 9 minutes and then comes out and says this.
What about defunding police, though?
Well, it isn't. We need to have more resources to do what we need to do to fund the Violence Against Women Act, to fund our initiatives on mental health, to address some larger issues which contribute to the injustices that exist, whether it's education, whether it's economy, whether it's jobs, whatever form of economic involvement, business creation, access to credit. The list goes on and on of injustices that we must address.
We're talking about Black Lives Matter and defunding the police. She's talking about Violence Against Women Act. I have no idea what Nancy Pelosi is talking about. Basically, kick rocks. The people who are pulling down statues, that's nice. The people who are going after defunding the police, that's nice. But you missed the point. Black bodies were commodities. Horses, goats, cows, human beings mangled into thinking beasts with the doing it, mangling the person that was actually mangling that human being. A commodity that had this unique distinction of knowing it was a commodity and yet could never access its own value. The slave patrols or cops were there in order to stop that commodity with legs from running away as a rational beast. The very creation of that point of view of a slave or a Negro deforms that person and the reality. Because in reality, that's a real person. The community or society that basically does that is also deformed in its thinking of that stuff. I'm trying to make the point to you that the issue here is that the black body, in and of itself, the very conversation of African Americans in this country deals with this notion of capitalism because we were born here for that reason. The conversation about blacks is one that black body was a commodity and your society is trying to deal with that fact. Keeping the same motif, meaning cheap labor, perpetuates that or propagates that. The Black Lives Matter movement and the question that needs to be asked is, do Black lives actually matter? And does it go beyond just this notion of defunding to police? The majority of blacks are not on welfare, no. But the poverty hurts, and it should be something that is dealt with. Illness, suicide, addiction, despair, difficulty, debt, heart disease, diabetes, unsafe communities, or those communities in disrepute, collapsing schools. History sticks to itself. It is not the statues. It is the persistence of that same motif, that rhyme that history kind of gives you. Cheap labor, either in prisons or in service. 44% of the population making $18,000 or less. What do you think perpetuates this type of cycle that we see in regards to violence? What perpetuates that stuff is poverty. I understand that you want to pull down the statues. That's great. But you got to get to the wealth disparity between blacks and whites that persists today. 176,000 for whites, 18,000 for blacks. So you have to ask yourself, why does that exist? You have to deal with the housing disparities that had taken place all the way up into the 80s. All of those things are issues of poverty that gets to the root of why those cops were even there in the first place. The commodity with the legs that had the potential to run away and know it was commodity but could no longer access its value, and having a society create cops in order to keep that commodity there. Now, Bob is going to explain to me why I am wrong. My 40-something years on this planet as a black person, in dealing with the black community and family members and living in this life, why I am wrong that poverty is the key issue in this case.
Well, I guess I'm going to reject you playing the I'm black and so I understand poverty better.
No.
I don't know if you lived in a. That's kind of what I heard there, which is a weird starting argument for me to basically not say anything, and I don't think that's necessarily a fair setup. I'm black, explain to me why I'm wrong. I don't know, Jamal. Black people aren't a monolith. There's
I don't think
plenty of black people that you've never met that completely disagree with you and see the world much differently than you and have conservative views on the far right and think you're absolutely ridiculous to even talk about police, that want more police. And there's plenty that want the abolition of police. They want to get rid of imperialism and then everything in between. So I don't think your one experience in 40 years and knowing, I don't know, say even if you knew 10,000 black people, there's millions upon millions of black people on this planet that gives you a monopoly on understanding all black people and their experiences.
No, but I think for me, it's weird that a white person is trying to explain to a black person what it's like to be black with those experiences. I do think that. I mean, you may dislike my framing of this, but fact of the matter is, I have been ensconced in this community for obvious reasons.
And where did you spend your last 3 years? Focused on Bernie Sanders or focused on supporting the Black Lives Matter movement?
But those things aren't indistinguishable from
one another. It's just where you put your focus and your attention. Your focus and attention was on a political movement around class, which is fantastic. You were not in the streets with Black Lives Matter. You were not at organizing events with Black Lives Matter.
That's true.
Movement. You can tell me 10 different Black Lives-centric organizations outside of Black Lives Matter. Do you know Black Youth Project 100?
But see, I think that's your problem.
That's where you chose to put your attention. So to discredit all these other black people in the other space, I guess I don't really know what you're getting to.
No.
For me, it comes back to the issue of preparation.
This is what you're missing. That's not discrediting anything. You mistake activists and people who are out in the community with everybody else. Because fact of the matter is the overwhelming majority of black people are not part of Black Lives Matter. And those people may be silently supporting Black Lives Matter and agreeing with their
Joe
premise.
Richardson.
But
I don't understand where you're going with this.
Farcical setup to be I was in the streets with activists of Black Lives Matter, so Bob, understands this stuff. I think that's insane.
That's not ever what I said, Jamar. I said I have engaged with and interacted with a range of different black people, from Republican black people in certain circles, neighbors growing up in my community, the high school. That's what I'm saying. So I guess I don't really understand your point. I'm trying to get back to this idea of reparations. And if you want to address issues of class, I don't know how that's not a reparations conversation where you're saying it's a black and white, black capitalism, but then you're going to somehow try to have a class discussion of fixed class without actually touching on the race issue. And that, for me, comes down to this conversation around reparations. Yeah, sure, highly unpopular. Getting rid of Christopher Columbus in the United States is also not a winning issue. Majority of people are fine with Christopher Columbus. The latest poll said 60% of Americans are okay with Christopher Columbus, right. But then you're okay with getting rid of it and saying, yeah, that's just the point. So again, this conversation comes back to me for reparations. And if you're going to talk about race and class, and that's reparations. If you want to just talk about class and blacks and whites and all poor people, that's great. But then I don't get where then the issue of race comes in. You're kind of sidestepping it and ignoring it. But Jamar, let's get into the show. We have a lot to talk about here. We can get back to this. Our weekly Friday Come At Me Bro segment of the first hour, talking about shots being fired at a congressional candidate's car in Missouri, 35 million still not having received their $1,200 checks, and the U.S. slapping sanctions on the ICC. Yep, Jamal, it's a full news day. If that's not enough, don't you worry, Misfits. We have a second hour for you after that. You're listening to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, live in D.C. We're back after this.
Breaking news, expert analysis, and exclusive stories, all in one place. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
On Fridays, we get punchy. Tune into Political Misfits on 105.5 FM or 102.9 or 104.7 FM in Kansas City to debate host Jamar Thomas. And be warned, no one's holding him back.
Come at me, bro. Come at me, bro. on Sputnik with Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert. Tune in.
Well, maybe mention like central bankers and markets are doubling down. Not you're saying everybody's doubling down. They're crazy.
They are. Everyone's crazy.
Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. Continue our conversation now with looking at the state of COVID-19 in the American Midwest and how progressive and leftist Democrats have to take on not only the Republican Party, but longtime establishment Democrats. Give us a call, 202-521-1320. 202-521-1320. We continue our conversation. Join with us here now from Missouri by Christine Hendricks, the president of the University City School Board, junior Bayard Rustin Fellow with the Fellowship of Reconciliation, and the contributor to the Truth Telling Project at the We Stay Woke podcast. Christine Hendricks, you're also the co-chair of Cori Bush's congressional campaign there, who's running against Lacy Clay. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me again.
Pleasure and a privilege to have you back. Christine, I want to ask you a big question just first before we start here. How are you feeling? What have the last few weeks been like for you? And if I can just add to that already large question, what has it been like there in Ferguson, Missouri in August of 2014 where you were, and now to find yourself in this moment 6 years later?
I think that for the most part, I think I have been coping with COVID very well. As far as being back in this position, for St. Louis, I don't feel like we really left this position. A couple years ago, we had mass demonstrations in the streets over the Stockley verdict. So St. Louis has been keeping the uprising alive, I believe. And I think that sometimes the greater nation doesn't pay attention because St. Louis is in the Midwest. It's not really a huge city, but it feels crazy to, again, also it feels crazy to, that, a lot of the lessons learned from Ferguson were not applied to life, were not applied to these police departments. And so, of course, we're going to be back in the streets again because the lessons that we learned, the things that the consent decrees that were passed were not fully realized. And so people, are going to be angry and say, why do we have to continue to do this every few years? Why do we have to do this?
Yeah, no. And then you were back out there again. And those of us who have been around these movements have kind of felt the same thing where it's like there's a rush and there's a conversation. It seems like something's taking place and it seems like things are moving. And so hopefully this is a different moment that will continue on. I wanted to ask here as I led out of the last segment there talking about here shots fired at Cori Bush's car there in Missouri. You are the co-chair of Cori Bush's campaign. Cori, a pastor, nurse, and activist, is running for U.S. Congress against longtime Democratic Congressmember Lacy Clay in Missouri's August primary. A heck of a week there, I'm sure, for you guys. On Tuesday, along with millions of others, I received a fundraising email on behalf of Bernie Sanders asking to donate to Cori Bush's campaign. Her national prominence, her national attention continues to grow, but then frightening, on Wednesday, it was reported that someone shot at Cori's car. Mrs. Bush there shared photos of the incident Wednesday afternoon via Twitter, saying a bullet went through her door handle and hit another tire. In the tweet, Cori wrote, "I'm committed to taking us from surviving St. Louis to living it." Yeah, I mean, wow. Just tell us about the last week there and just the stark reminder that protesting and being vocal on trying to take power from people is not a safe or easy thing to do.
And I just want to be really clear about what it means to live in St. Louis. St. Louis is, like I said, it's not a very huge city, but St. Louis is consistently in the top 5 as being one of the most dangerous and violent cities to live in. And we have a congressperson who has been in there my entire adult life. And the situation in St. Louis has not gotten better. And the fact that someone with Cori's prominence can be touched so easily is a severe problem here in St. Louis. And it all stems down to the fact that people in St. Louis are living in severe poverty. There is severe racism, segregation, and separation in the city. And a lot of times people like to gloss over it. They like to think that, Ferguson was an aberration, but it's not. St. Louis is a very violent city, so it's sad to see that someone like Cori, had to experience that. But I know that that's why she's running. I know she's running because she wants to change the conditions and the things that people have to deal with in St. Louis and to actually address the problems that we have here. And our current congressperson is not doing that.
Yeah, and it seems like we talk so much, obviously, this kind of idea about Democrats fighting Republicans, but there you are having to take on an establishment Democrat. I mean, the same thing for others like Jamal Bowman, who is running in the Bronx against Representative Elliot Engel, who kind of just got caught on a hot mic basically saying he wouldn't have cared having to talk at the Black Lives Matter rally that he was attending if he wasn't up for re-election. And so, Christine, I mean, we had kind of pontificated when the kind of economic unrest and social unrest would hit the electoral processes in this country. And I really thought it would be too soon to look at November or even these current primaries before it would take maybe 6 months, a year to actually get candidates in there running. And it seems like that timetable has been shifted up into right now. Things are happening right now in the electoral space.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm hoping that people are paying attention to some of the people out here, like Cori Bush, who are running against these establishment Democrats. If you really look at some of the establishment Democrats' records, there's often times when they vote with Republicans. And the reason they do this is because their corporate interests and their corporate donors want that. And so they don't care about the people on the ground. They care about their donors. They care about the people who are keeping their coffers high. And so that's how they're going to vote. And we need to be paying attention to that. Just because they have a D behind their name does not mean that they're for the people.
You know, that's a good point. But I guess the question always to me boils down to the one of accountability. What does accountability look like in a political space when it feels like oftentimes you're stuck with just not great options? Like, so explain to me when you're looking at the political, because I'll give you an example. When these guys made the point, the DCCC had said, we will basically blacklist any company that goes into this notion of assisting a lefty take down an incumbent. That would basically mean you're in a situation where it's always Republican versus a dinosaur that's in place where the Republican is going to be the one to take that spot. What does accountability look like in that process if you're stuck with, let's say, two not great options?
Right. I think accountability can look like putting your money somewhere else, even in the primaries or throughout the year. There are a lot of people who donate to the DCCC throughout the year. If you're unhappy with the process that they have, if we're unhappy with the fact that they're not supporting primaries for candidates, then we need to show them with our money. We can also show them with our time. They have offices here locally, but people need to start showing up, start writing letters, start being more involved with their local politics, because if we're not involved, then they continue to do the things that they do without repercussions. And then people also have to run. We need regular, everyday people like AOC, like Cori Bush, to people like Lacey Clay, because if they're not challenged, then they won't think that they have to change. A few years ago, one of our state reps ran against Lacey Clay. Her name was Maria Chappelle-Nadal. And right after that, Lacey Clay held a town hall. He hasn't held one since, but because he was challenged, he came back and he met with the people. And so I think that if we continue to challenge them at the box, then we can sometimes see results from our elected officials.
Yeah, I want to talk about one currently elected official and pivot here to national politics. Here, Christine Hendricks, we're on Political Misfits 202-521-1320. I just have to get to this Donald Trump stories here the last few days. First, it comes out that he'll go back on the campaign trail on June 19th in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of all places there. The race massacre, the bombing of people on American soil back in 1921, I believe, just a disgusting place for him to have his first rally. And then the announcement that the Republican National Committee will now move their August convention from North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida. The change of venue, therefore, the RNC was sparked after Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina, a Democrat, said he could not guarantee the RNC a full-fledged convention with an arena packed with party officials, delegates, and activists due to health concerns. Not quite sure that the pandemic there of COVID-19 is much better in northern Florida. So that doesn't really make sense. But obviously, northern Florida, Jacksonville, a heightened area, Christine, kind of funny to lighten the mood, basically, is in that Tulsa event going back. When you register for the event, you actually have to sign a waiver saying you cannot sue Donald Trump or his campaign if you catch COVID at the rally. But it seems like they're being pretty intentional here, picking Tulsa and then Jacksonville to have these events here at the height of these racial protests.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put it past them. I don't give Trump any credit for it because I don't feel like he's bright enough to actually have that realization. But I do think that people close to him, like Stephen Miller, are the type of people that would want to stoke that racial animus in order to rile up their base, because their base actually feeds off of this this, you know? So I wouldn't put it past this team. I give him no credit ever.
Yeah, we have a caller on the line, Tyrese. Tyrese, you're here with Christine Hendricks and Political Misfits. Are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here. How y'all doing? Good morning.
Tyrese, what's up, man?
Well, you know, I'm a peaceful person. Y'all know I'm a Trump supporter, but at the same time, I like.
There, buddy? Oh, there you are.
Like Jessica Tora, too. So what I'm trying to say is this, look, we can't let this country spin out of control dealing with, you got knuckleheads out here that's on the right and left, and you got these political powerful elite that's trying to get us to go head to head with each other. Because I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Bob, black people going to be the last one. We're going to be the people that's going to be carrying the bag when it's all over. Okay? We're going to suffer the most. We don't really have that much money. It's poverty in the black community. In New Orleans, the poverty rate is high. The homeless rate is high. I see black people on the streets. I see white people on the street. I see homeless vets. We got to work together to try to come up with a resolution to change this poverty and the race question that can be easily done with a specific law to look over law enforcement in general. Okay? I'm seeing things spinning out of control now. I'm watching the media. I'm watching YouTube, and I'm seeing people becoming kind of like almost racist, you know? And I'm going to say on both sides. What I'm saying is, I spoke to people from Uganda and Sudan, okay? You don't want no civil war, okay? I spoke to a family. It was just him and his sister, the only two survived. When the other family members got their heads bashed in, and they got killed by the other tribes. I don't want us to become like that, you know? And it was said that it was our policies that led to that over there. What I'm saying is this. I know it's got a lot of hate. A lot of people got dislike in their heart and hate, but we got to work together, man. I just saw Dave Chappelle thing today, and he was upset. And he's a, celebrity. He was upset. I'm like, oh, my God. I'm saying we just can't. Look, I went through Katrina, and they had a lot of people dying in Katrina. And a lot of people that died, they had people die because they can't get the medicines, like, what you call that, for diabetes, that medicines and other medicines. So we can't let this country go into a full-scale civil war, because most people are going to die from not getting the proper nutrition and also your medicines. That's all I want to say.
Thanks,
we got to, it's wise.
Tyrese, always appreciate the call. Jamal Thomas, if you want to jump in there on anything Tyrese has to say.
Yeah, I do. Tyrese, I agree with you. I mean, part and parcel to Martin Luther King's argument was peace was an active strategy. It wasn't, Malcolm X, if you look at the debates back during the time where Baldwin and X and these guys, where X was kind of deriding these guys, and X could deride them easily because people were angry, upset because they were in poverty. His people were suffering. And it's easy to get a large number of people who are very angry when those people are in rough and difficult conditions. Now, King making this argument of love your neighbor, that is not the sexiest of arguments. By the same token, he realized that if you're going to get anywhere, you're going to get somewhere together. And all of us are in this. This notion of integration and passing laws for that was ludicrous. The law is not real. Those people had already been integrated. That law was only just to kind of, look, you guys need to kind of make room for these darkies now. Well, the same thing is true now. When Tyrese is making this point about poverty, he's making that point because what he realizes is that there is no such thing as equality under any circumstance. I accept you as a human being, but yes, you're still going to be dirt poor, making $18,000 a year, dying 3-1. Like, what's like? Yes, I think I accept and appreciate that you accept me as a human being, but I can't buy my insulin. I can't get to the doctor. I can't get to the point A to point B. Do you realize I have a family member? I know I've spent from the year 17 years old being diagnosed with kidney failure to now being in one hospital after the next. I've been in every hospital in Richmond, Virginia, staying time in each of those hospitals. I've been in hospitals all across the world, including requiring massive being on the deathbed and everything else. I think of anybody else, I have a very clear idea of what our healthcare system is and how we engage the healthcare system and the problems of it. I have family, people who make decent wages who still don't get healthcare or don't go to the doctor because they don't want the bill. Like, it goes beyond just this notion of don't kill me, it also goes into how many people are dying for X and for Y, and is there other ways around dealing with that issue as opposed to specifically defunding cops. And I accept that defunding cops includes this notion of taking that money. The New York Police Department has a budget of $6 billion. That's obscene. And you look at crime hasn't been going up, and their budget continues to go up. Like, that's obscene. Christine, do you want to add anything to the caller, to Tyrese? I think he's making a really good point here that people are getting angry, and there is a certain degree of consternation where you push on one side and the people push back, and you have the president in this case pushing back, and that this seems could be somewhat of a crisis point. But is it a fair point to say that there's also some level of chaos that's always necessary to transcend to where you were prior?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that notion of there's that necessary chaos. I think as far as descending into some type of civil war, well, there's already been a war against Black folks, Black bodies, and even other people of color in this country. And I think that I think the caller maybe made the point about Dave Chappelle saying that right now this could be the last stand of civil discourse and civil protest in this country before it truly does spiral out of control. And I think that should be a warning to those who have power and who can make laws to quit with the Band-Aids. I don't, like today I just read an article that said Band-Aid is going to come out with different skin shades. That's not going to do anything to help the lives of Black folks, especially poor Black and brown folks. And so as we, continue to have people out in the street protesting, and we say Black Lives Matter, ultimately we mean that when you lift the lives of the ordinary poor Black person, everyone's life will be lifted in this country. If we make sure that the poorest Black person, that homeless person has health insurance, we know that everyone in our country will have health insurance. And so until we as a country look inside ourselves and make a conscious decision to lift the least disease, then anything that happens in this country is the karmic response that we deserve.
Yeah, let me talk here. Just one last story here with Christine Hendricks. Give us a call. Anything on your mind? 202-521-1320. I wanted to get back into some Missouri news that obviously is a trend across many Republican-run states here in the United States as coronavirus continues to spread, continues to peak in over 20 states now in the United States. But Missouri Governor Mike Parson, there where you're at, Christine, said starting next Tuesday, the Show Me State will remove all statewide restrictions that have been in place during the COVID-19 outbreak. Parson said the second phase of the state's recovery plan beginning on June 16th means Missouri will be fully open for business in the entire state. He went on to say, here we are today, just over 90 days since our first COVID-19 case in Missouri, and I'm proud to say we have overcome all of these challenges and more and we've met our 4 pillars to reopen. Now is the time to begin repairing our economy and get Missouri businesses, communities, and citizens back on their feet and back at work. I mean, Christina, for me, it's just absurd, right? Because the whole idea in the conversation, it goes back to Band-Aid fixes here, is that we're going to try to fix the economy we had. Well, the economy we had was not working for millions of people. And so now the goal is basically to get back to where we were without actually addressing any of the problems within it. I mean, all of it always constantly feels like Dr. King's conversation around it. Back to Jamal's point about integrating into a burning house. So what exactly are we trying to fix? What exactly are we trying to get back to? What exactly is the norm people are pushing? And obviously the coronavirus is continuing to ravage through nursing homes, ravishing seniors, ravishing poor and Black communities across Missouri, across St. Louis. What did you make of these latest statements from the governor?
I mean, he is completely out of touch, but we knew this before the coronavirus. And again, he's another one who's responding to his corporate donors. It's corporations who are going to be the beneficiaries of the economy reopening. It's going to be the poor Black and brown folks who have already been disproportionately affected by this, who will continue the brunt of it. A lot of the people who are working and have been working are the same people that don't have health insurance. So I'm really hoping that those downstate, because I feel like a lot of the leaders in St. Louis may not open St. Louis up, but I feel like downstate, there may be a spike in coronavirus cases that they're not ready for and still can't even be handled in St. Louis. St. Louis doesn't have the means to necessarily handle what is going to happen downstate. I'm very concerned as the president of a school board, what that means for, I have 3 children in public school, what that means for how we're going to open up our schools. Our schools are receiving no guidance from the state. done. So any measures that they take would be strictly because they're doing the research. And I think that is crazy to force our superintendents and our school board into becoming health experts and trying to let this out without having guidance from our. It's literally crazy.
Yeah, the conversation here in Washington, D.C., Rockford, Illinois, teachers I've talked to in many different school districts basically saying we have no idea what's going on, what's going to happen. And in many ways, expanding the conversation, Christine, is to talk about the lack of infrastructure of organizing amongst teachers in many ways, that these teachers are kind of saying we're supposed to wait for these administrators. Well, the administrators are not going to actually be here with the children. And obviously, we're way ahead of ourselves to even make up what's going to happen in the fall, depending on if the coronavirus continues. So absolute chaos. We'll have to have you back in the future to talk about the impact of the coronavirus on education, especially as we head back to the fall. With that, though, we are out of time here with you, Christine Hendricks. Christine, where can people find more of you and your work online, as well as the Cori Bush campaign?
You can Christine Hendricks, U City School Board on Facebook. I think my president is Black on Instagram, and K About It on Twitter.
Fantastic, Christine Hendricks. Thank you as always. With that, we'll take a quick break before coming back with more Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik live in DC. We're back after this.
This is Dominic Carter, a political reporter in New York for Verizon Files TV News.
This is Dr. Bill Honigman of Progressive Democrats of America, PDAmerica.org.
Hey, everybody, my name is Tim Black of The Tim Black Show.
This is Tom Luongo of Gold Guts and Guns.
Hello, this is Benny Johnson.
Hi, this is Juanita Broderick, author of You'd Better Put Some Ice on That.
This is Jamal Thomas from the Progressive Soapbox.
Hey, this is Raheem from D.C.
This is Rachel Blevins, a correspondent with RT America, and you're listening to Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.
When I'm waking up in the morning and I'm looking for what's on the queue for the day, I tune to Fault Line with Nixon and Stranahan.
The wokest radio show for your wokest AM.
These guys are the best in the business and experts when it comes to policy.
They're bringing you the top headlines with an angle that you won't see in the mainstream media.
Fault Lines is the greatest show on the radio. I enjoy immensely talking with Lee and Garland. They always treat me from either side with due respect, and it's a wonderful conversation.
The best morning news show in America. Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.
Lee and Garland speak truth to power from the depths of the swamp itself, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Bob Schleher. We're here sort of kind of with Jamal Thomas. We continue to bring you brand new episodes of Political Misfits Monday through Friday, closing out the week here on June 12th. Give us a call, 202-521-1320. That's 202-521-1320. If you're radio shy, head over to Twitter. Shoot us a note there at Sputnik Misfits, or you can get over to the Progressive Soapbox YouTube channel and chat us up. Make sure to get your comments on air or give us a call, 202-521-1320. Jamal, I got my paycheck. I got my stimulus check, so I'm doing okay. But allegedly here, 35 million people have not received their $1,200 checks, according to new data. Quite remarkable, this report from CNBC. The government should have all the information it needs to send payment to at least 13 to 18 million of those who are still waiting. So about a little over a third of people, there's no excuse for why the government hasn't gotten them relief. And about 11 million people, including that 35 million, do not pay taxes and do not get government benefits, making reaching them understandably a bit harder. So we've talked about the difficulties if you haven't filed taxes the last few years, the ridiculousness. I mean, we covered the story like a month ago where if you were married to a non-citizen, you couldn't receive the check. Yeah. But here the government, I mean, clearly what's going on? Are they just basically stealing the money? Are they not sending the money? Are they just working incredibly slow on this and there's backlog? But if you're waiting at home, it's hard because obviously $1,200 for anybody is going to be feel good. It's going to be a boost in your paycheck. But 3 months into this thing, what is $1,200 even at this point?
If you're making $10 an hour, which at one point I was. I mean, in fact, I was making less. I was working at Joe Mugg's coffee shop in West Broad in Richmond, Virginia, because hometown. That $1,200 is a ton of cash. It honestly is. It's more than what you would make under normal circumstances, especially when you take out taxes and healthcare and all this other stuff. That money is vital. And, we on this show months ago said that check probably doesn't get there until June or July. It is June and they still haven't got that check. They don't care. And that's the thing, right? When Nancy Pelosi is dancing in front of her iceboxes, $12,000 refrigerators, 2 of them. Well, does it dig into her? Like with the level of need and necessity to get that money? No, it doesn't. Does Donald Trump care? Donald Trump was a guy who took off and said, yeah, I'm gonna shut down the government because I'm not getting what I want as a political thing, leaving thousands without getting any paycheck for months. He didn't care. I think this is kind of what I get to when I say there's a decapitation almost in regards to what your government does and cares about versus what the public wants and what the public needs. And until that's fixed, that's not a voting thing. That's a in the streets thing. That's something else.
Yeah. No, it's an economy. I mean, I don't know anything more damning to American democracy than the Citizens United decision that just allows endless money to flow into campaigns, working on campaigns and having lost to people that can raise millions of dollars in like 3 House parties compared to what it would take a year or 2 years. And then why even compete with the one politician you want to take on when the other 10 that are running are just as bad? And so many people have just completely abandoned the electoral space because of the economy. And Jamal, to make your argument, if you focus on the economics and get people some cash to even be able to then participate in the electoral process, that would be a huge change in our system as well. We have a caller on the line here, Dylan. Dylan, thank you for calling into Political Misfits. You can also give us a call, 202-521-1320. Dylan, are you there?
Hey.
What's up, man? What's on your mind?
About Malcolm X lately. Marcus Garvey.
What have you been thinking about them on?
What do you guys think about black nationalism in general?
Oh, I see.
Well, let me ask you. Let's ask you real quick for your thought, and then we'll give our answer offline. But Dylan, give us your point here, and then we'll have to get to our next caller.
I thought about.
Thanks, Dylan. I appreciate your call, man.
Get back to you. Yeah, Dylan, we'll get back to you next.
I appreciate your call, dog.
Get back to you on Monday. Give us a call back, 202-521-1320. I mean, this is kind of like a broader conversation that we haven't gotten into, and I think it would take more than the 2 minutes we have before we get to our next guest. But for me, just nationalism is not a healthy thing. I think when it comes to race, a social construct, it's not a healthy thing for humans to orient themselves around that race. Given the contextual situation, we live on a planet of nation states and tribes. It seems like we kind of have to have that conversation. But Jamal, about 30 seconds here before we go to our break. Black nationalism, Garvey and Malcolm X.
Yeah, I disagree with it. I mean, even if today you picked up and went to another country, you're still American. You're still thinking of crabs from Baltimore, all that stuff. I don't buy this. I agree with you on this, Bob. One last point. Participating in the political process. You realize the overwhelming majority of people who don't participate are the ones that make less than $30,000 a year. Give them cash. I promise you, they will participate. Cash has all sorts of outcomes, and this is one of them.
Yeah, no money, and that goes to this kind of goes back to kind of split the difference on our earlier conversation, where it's just saying like you can give people stuff, but you still got to mobilize, you still got to educate, you can still reach out to them, and that's kind of the twofold, right? Like if people have more money, they're going to be able to then transport themselves to your organizing event, and so that does help lubricate it. But it is a process of like multifold. Get the money out to people, and then how do you activate, mobilize, educate people is just a big conversation, and I hope we get to struggle with those conversations if we ever see any type of redistribution of wealth in this country.
We can, but Jamal, you're being too literal, I think. Like the climate change argument. If you give people money, they start caring about climate because at that point they're in a situation to care. I agree. Don't get me wrong. You do mobilize, but I'm saying those people start kind of going to your point, like it just almost naturally the moment that those people start believing that the political process gives something back to me, or for that matter, that they matter.
Yeah, it's a lubricant that allows for the rest. Take place. Jamal, let's take a quick break before we turn to talk about the Trump administration putting sanctions on the International Criminal Court. It's like Trump has become Oprah. You get a sanction. You get a sanction. Sanctions for everyone. Jamal, we'll talk sanctions after the break. You're listening to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik Live in D.C. We're back after this.
By Any Means Necessary is your guide to the movement and efforts shaping the world around us, from mass incarceration.
No longer am I interested in or concerned with prison reform. I am interested only in the eradication of prisons.
To the battle between police and water protectors.
It was a pretty punishing disregard for the sanctity of human life, that unleashing water cannons on peaceful, prayerful water protectors.
From efforts to protect the environment.
The climate movement is ready to, with plenty of opposition research and force and strength, along with, the right of both science and morality, to fight them on this.
To the movement for Black lives.
When I first saw the Michael Brown video, when I saw that it clearly contradicted the narrative put forth by the Ferguson Police Department and by police supporters in general, 3 words came to mind: color me shocked.
Stay tuned to By Any Means Necessary, 5 days a week here on Radio Sputnik.
Back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring news, politics, and culture to you daily without the red and blue treatment. I'm Bob Schlehuber here with Jamal Thomas. Jamal, I said there before the break, sanctions on their way. Not even quite sure how this next story works, given that the U.S. completely ignores the international law and has made it abundantly clear that they will not partake in the ICC. But the United States, nonetheless, has just announced that they will place sanctions on the ICC. The decision to put sanctions on the court officials comes after the ICC appeals judges authorized an investigation in March into allegations of war crimes by the U.S. military and intelligence personnel, Afghan forces, and the Taliban in Afghanistan. In addition, Donald Trump also authorized the expansion of visa restrictions against ICC officials and their families. In a White House statement, the administration said the International Criminal Court's actions are an attack on the rights of the American people and threaten to infringe upon our national sovereignty. The administration went on to say it had strong reason to believe that there is corruption and misconduct at the highest levels of the prosecutor's office, but provided no evidence to back up this claim. To talk more about the story and more is our good friend Dan Kovalik, author and human rights and labor lawyer. His most recent book is No More War: How the West Violates International Law by Using Humanitarian Intervention to Advance Economic and Strategic Interest. Yes. Dan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much.
Well, Dan, I mean, the obvious question to start with here have you been sanctioned yet?
I have not been sanctioned yet, but suggest, I guess it's, just a matter of time, I imagine.
Well, tell us more about the sanctions against the ICC. I thought it was quite rich here. U.S. screaming foul. Even William Barr, the DOJ, said other countries are manipulating the courts to attack the U.S. Yes,
well, this is, obviously not true. And actually, as I write in the book that you mentioned, I have a whole chapter on the ICC. The U.S. has always had contempt for the International Criminal Court. Just a little history, Bill Clinton, his team helped to water down the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. So the U.S. was very deeply involved in making sure that the International Criminal Court would be as weak as it possibly could be, so that if the U.S. were ever sanctioned, essentially ICC would have as few teeth as possible. And then Clinton backed out of the ICC. That is, he helped negotiate it to make sure it was weak, and then didn't get it ratified anyway. And then George W. Bush unsigned it. So, and ever since that time, we made it clear that the ICC has no application to the U.S. because we're not a party to it. But at the same time, the U.S. is very quick to call for the ICC to investigate, leaders of other countries. So, there's just a lot of hypocrisy when it comes to this.
Dan, the ICC, when it comes from the standpoint of the United States, I've always been shocked that George Bush was never even put up as a potential for the ICC to investigate. What teeth does it have in regards to going after anything from the standpoint of the United States? It looks like it's just terrified to deal with legitimate, actual, crime that is literally staring it in the face.
Yeah, well, again, the problem the ICC has is that the United States is not a party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court.
But it is true that if it's in a country, for example, in Afghanistan, the crimes that were committed in Afghanistan by those soldiers was directly related to the United States intervention into Iraq and Afghanistan. It seems like it would be fair game to go after Bush for something like that.
That's right. Okay, so that, you make the point. If the U.S. has committed misdeeds in a country that itself is a party to the ICC, then there is an ability for the ICC to go after people, U.S. persons involved in those misdeeds. And that is what they're trying to do in the case of Afghanistan. They have a lot of evidence of war crimes committed by the U.S. military in Afghanistan over the last 19 years. And those would be grist for an investigation. They're now saying they're going to investigate. And that is what has led Trump to sanction them. The other thing that's led Trump to sanction them is the fact that they now have announced they want to investigate Israeli crimes in the occupied territories. To answer your question, why haven't they gone after the U.S. More for these types of crimes? Simply because the U.S. has over time threatened these very type of sanctions. The ICC is known, if they go after the U.S. or Israel, there will be repercussions, and there are. Earlier, for these sanctions, the U.S. denied a travel visa for the head of the ICC to even enter the United States. So there's a lot of fear from the powerful countries that the ICC has. And of course, so the result is the ICC up till now has almost solely gone after African countries. And the only convictions the ICC has ever obtained were against African leaders. Essentially, they go after the poorest, weakest countries, and they leave the rich countries alone. I mean, sadly, what has happened is that international law has become a law to govern the weak and the poor. Basically, the richer countries are immune from it.
In reading this is extremely broad. Does this hit people who are even not ICC members? I mean, Bob might have been joking about you being part of the sanctions in this, but the sanctions go so far, or this reading goes so far as to basically say anything pertaining to the investigations into the United States. That means anybody that is added into this could potentially be eligible for sanctions.
Yes, well, and again, for some time, the United States has threatened that it would retaliate against not only the ICC, but anyone helping the ICC in a prosecution involving the United States. And so, yes, I think the way that this is worded matches those threats. And that is if, for example, I decided to help the ICC in some way with the prosecution. I'm a lawyer. I could work for them or volunteer my services to look into U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan. Theoretically, I would be sanctioned for that. And people in Europe with the European Human Rights Commission or whatever who would help with this investigation could be sanctioned. So, yes, I mean, the sanctions could be very broad.
Yeah, and just the last note on that executive order there, Donald Trump had to declare a national emergency in order to put those sanctions forward. So that's the focus. Protesters in the street, coronavirus ravaging the country, and we have a national emergency because the ICC is looking into the greatest purveyor of violence on this planet's war crimes. Dan Kovalik, I wanted to just ask you to get your thoughts here. The German government Wednesday said it was had received official confirmation from the United States of plans to reduce the number of American forces in Germany. Last week, the Wall Street Journal newspaper first reported that Donald Trump wanted to pull some 9,500 of the 34,500 U.S. troops from Germany. There's 34,000 troops in Germany?
Yeah.
Yeah, that shocked me a little bit in my ignorance on a number of troops around the world that we still have out there. Trump has obviously been talking for, I don't know, a good 9-10 months now about moving troops to Poland, and this seemingly where some of these troops will head. I don't know, Dan, so many of these things feel a lot to think about right here, but for me, it's just the utter nonsense again that people think that somehow Donald Trump was a puppet of Vladimir Putin. If Vladimir Putin was the puppet master of Donald Trump, would he have nearly 10,000 troops moving to Poland closer to their border?
No, of course not. The U.S. is also threatening to put nuclear weapons in Poland. The U.S. has backed out of key nuclear disarmament deals with Russia. Yeah, I mean, it's frankly a joke, that somehow Trump is a pawn of Putin in Russia. I mean, if anything, he has increased tensions with Russia, which people should be concerned about. Instead, I hear some liberals complaining, you're taking 9,000 troops out of Germany. That's just going to leave them open to Russian aggression. I mean, it's just silliness, right? NATO has troops up to the Russian border. Could you imagine if Russia had troops up to the Mexican-American border or the Canadian-American border? I mean, that's just inconceivable, and yet it seems like for many Americans, there can't be enough tension with Russia.
Yeah, Jamal Thomas, and to further that, it just shows Donald Trump, again, kind of basically poking his finger there at his German, I don't want to say allies, whatever, German relations, German allies, basically frazzled, upset at Merkel, sanctioning everyone, basically. And you see North Korea now basically saying we're done with talks as well. Doesn't seem like Donald Trump is going to get that foreign policy when he so desperately wanted.
No, he's failed at everything. I mean, if in real terms.
Spoiler alert, yeah.
I mean, this has been pretty bad. And to make it worse, he's the one that's kind of increased these tensions. From the ICC thing, or for that matter, even his tension with Merkel, or from the standpoint of Russia, meaning I'm going to put weapons in Poland and Russia saying they're going to respond to that. Is it fair to say that Donald Trump has basically organized the world around him? Meaning any notion of America first has basically ended up being the world versus the U.S. and basically weakening relationships abroad.
Yes, I think that's very true. Yes, he is very as you're suggesting, he is very much personalized U.S. foreign policy to being, as you say, all about him. It's true with his domestic policy as well. He threatens and mocks governors who don't toe the line with him. And that's a very dangerous way to run, again, a foreign or domestic policy. When foreign policy is left up to the whims of an individual and his own personal feelings, that's quite dangerous. And as you say, we're seeing that in a number of different respects.
Yeah, I wish we had more time with you. Always love talking with you. We have about 30 seconds left. Where can people find your latest book online?
Oh, well, thank you so much. I mean, go to Amazon. You can order from Barnes & Noble, from independent bookstores. It's pretty much available everywhere.
Well, fantastic. That was Dan Kovalik, the author of No More War, How the West Violates International Law by Using Humanitarian Intervention, Advance Economic and Strategic Interest. Dan, thank you again. With that, we turn to our second hour of politics, news, and culture here on Radio Sputnik. You're listening to Political Misfits live in D.C. We're back after this.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am here with my co-host Bob Schlehuber. We still have a lot to cover over the next hour, including what's likely to be a spirited come at me bro. Also, as always, your chats, tweets, and calls are amply appreciated. You can join us at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make the show what it is, and it is amply appreciated. Now, I, on my own platform and on this show, asked for demand for all of those millions of people in the street, and it was answered. Now, it's not exactly the one that I wanted, but I still think it's the one that I will die on the flag, supporting my comrades to back. Defund the police. Clear, unapologetic, and for America, provocative. Which honestly, a case could be made is exactly what it should be. How did the political instrument respond to this demand from millions that flung their bodies into the streets, that was beaten by cops, mace, tear gas, pepper sprayed, a punch, a kick, a shield to the face, a baton to the skull? What they wanted basically was met with unmitigated force by the instruments of the state, unleash basically on a public that was there to seek a redress of their grievances. Democrats took a knee for 9 minutes and said, we got to shut those people up who are calling for the defunding of the police. Joe Biden put out an FU op-ed calling for $300 million more to the cops. Now, the level of stupidity of this one needs to be put into perspective. For comparison, New York, one state, has a police budget of $6 billion. And Joe Biden is calling for $300 million more for the entire country. That is a 20th of one state's budget. But yeah, he's totally taking this issue seriously. Presidential candidate that is uniquely culpable for the very criminal justice system that murdered Floyd. That's his response. Trump, being more honest, didn't take a knee. He did exactly what you would expect. We're going to give more money to those cops. Believe it or not, I appreciate the honesty of nothing over nothing and taking a knee. To discuss the potential political system entirely incapable of frankly doing their jobs, we're joined by Jamal Muhammad, host of the Love Lounge radio show in the old school lunch bag mix on Square One Radio. Jamal, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
What's up, gentlemen? My pleasure.
Absolutely.
What's up?
So before we get into the issues of the day, how have you been processing everything that has been taking place? The people in the streets, the forensic potential, or at the very least the feel of forensic potential. How have you been appraising what's been going on?
Great question. So let me just put it this way. So I have been an activist for about 35 years. I'm 50 now, and I started getting into activism back in like 85 when I was a teenager. I was 15 years old. And a lot of the things that we saw back in 85, we have seen continue to manifest and even grow in 2020. So during those 35 years, I've seen a steady progress, but at a very slow pace. Now, fast forward to today right now, I'm going to be honest, I was surprised at what has all happened. I felt what has happened in the past 3 weeks was a good 10 to 20 years ahead of us. So for me, I'm processing every single thing that I'm seeing and saying, wow, this has all been expedited. And I think it's due to the fact that the global pandemic of coronavirus, COVID-19, has stopped everyone in the world, not just America, from being distracted from whatever it may be, whether it be their job and money or entertainment and sports and activities where we have usually been distracted. And now you have to sit and you have to watch what's happening. And watching the news has given everybody the opportunity to actually see what happened with George Floyd, rest in peace, and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. and say, wait a minute, here it is again. And I think it woke so many people up, man. I think it woke up so many people, and I'm happy to see what's happening because the change that I'm seeing occur is something that, like I said, I didn't see happening for another 10 to 20 years. So it's a great thing. And people can say whatever they want to say, but the rioting and the attacking of these businesses and so forth, if that did not happen, I don't think we would be seeing the changes that we're seeing now, because this is not the first time we marched and protest. I was part of the whole D.C. to Ferguson movement in D.C. and plenty of other protests that have gone on, the marches that we had, the anniversary of the March on Washington, and a lot of other things, even promoting the issue with the Central Park 5 and the prison industrial complex, and we did not get the same response. So, hey, I'm excited about it. I'm going to be honest with you.
I am extraordinarily excited about it. You know, the funny part, there's an episode of Star Trek. They hate it when I talk about Star Trek on the show. But there's an episode
Who hates it? Who hates it? I don't mind Star Trek.
Well, the producer, Michelle hates it.
The producer.
I could be
wrong.
wrong.
Point fingers. The producer. I don't mind some Star Trek talk.
Okay, fair enough. Star Trek reference talking about protests. So in one of the episodes, they were dealing with a society that basically had terrorists. The people were trying to get action. There was a subordinate class that was being taken advantage of and being expropriated of wealth and everything else, and that class rebelled, and they started setting stuff on fire and taking people hostages. Now, at the end of the show, Wesley Crusher asks Picard, why do people do this? Now, Picard said, because sometimes they get results. Now, Britain refused to air that because they were in the middle of a terrorist thing. Picard, the reality of it is, even evolved humans couldn't deal with that issue honest, like they dealt with it honestly and basically said, look, sometimes this gets results, whether we like it or not. The wild part about it is people hate hearing that. And yet you have to deal with, that's true. It's a human thing, right? It's not so much that you love it. It's more so that it's expected based upon, it's a direct result of what took place prior. People always ignore the fact that, it's dealing with what took place prior. The defund the police call. Now, Donald Trump, I want you to hear his response to this. He says, we're working to finalize an executive order that will encourage police departments nationwide to meet the most current professional standards for the use of force, including tactics for de-escalation. Trump said at a roundtable with law enforcement in Dallas. Also, we'll encourage pilot programs that allow social workers to join certain law enforcement officers so that they can work together. We're not defunding the police. If anything, we're going the other route. Trump said, we're going to make sure our police department is well trained, perfectly trained, and have the best equipment. Now, Jamal, in basic terms, what does it mean to defund the police? And what has been done, meaning in other places that have defunded the police, and what have been the results of those departments in that reform?
So let me say this first. Defunding the police will not mean anything if you do not change the legislation that exists. If the politicians and the government does not change the laws, does not enforce accountability with the police. So you can defund them all you want, unless you're going to completely get rid of police completely, which I don't think is the best thing to happen, especially overnight, unless you can replace it with another entity that is going to help protect and really serve. Defunding the police won't do anything. Now, we're talking about with defunding, we're talking about taking the amount of money allocated to policing and lowering it, and even doing what they did in Camden, New Jersey, where they replaced the current police department because there was so much crime and so much corruption, and replacing it with a whole new staff and new chief and so forth, which actually brought down crime by 40% in Camden. And it's an excellent model for the rest of the country to see. But defunding the police does not mean getting rid of the police. It does not mean completely getting rid of all the funding for the police. It means taking out money that you would put into military vehicles that were being used for the police, and all this extra money that was being used to pay out for citizens that had been wrongfully accused and brutalized and so forth, and putting it to somewhere else. We have a lot of work to do. This is not going to happen overnight. This did not happen overnight. But it's been exposed that we have a major police corruption problem in America, and it makes all the so-called quote-unquote good police officers, which I know exist because some of them are my friends, look horrible. As a black man in America who gets pulled over by the police twice a year, and I've seen plenty of situations. I've been arrested myself and harassed by police, knowing that these officers, even when they do get fired, they either come right back on the job because they have the funding and they have the police unions, or they go and get hired like they're recruiting down in Florida to another police department, just like the officer who killed Tamir Rice had lost one job and went to another, just like the officer that killed Antoine Rose in my hometown of Pittsburgh. They can easily go and get another job because the resources there and the funding is there to just move police officers around. So that when you talk about defunding the police, we're talking about, I'm not saying that you should get completely rid of all the money for policing because we are not at that phase as a country yet. But we need to change how much money is going to the police departments because, first of all, because it's way too much. And, they've militarized the police and send it to somewhere else, to other
No, I totally hear you, and I think it's kind of the point Jamal was making earlier about accountability. I mean, we've worked extremely hard here in Washington, D.C. to take funding. You could say it's from the police, but it's from the overall budget. Washington, D.C. is incredibly wealthy and put it towards violence interruption programs, different models. You talked about Camden, but in Stockton, California, and Chicago, in other cities across the United States, they have violence interrupters. There are other ways, and that's always the thing where people get kind of stuck on this police issue. It's like there's mental health care workers, and we need to build more mental health care facilities. There are issues of healthcare. We need more accessibility, and we need more Black doctors in different hospitals beyond just giving people free healthcare. I mean, there's so many layers to all of this when it comes to the entire budget, and the focus became on the police. But back to my point on the interruption is that we push these programs forward. We get the programs, we pass the bills, we get some type of money, but then all that happens is then basically it's still a government-run program. And so the Mayor Muriel Bowser, Black Lives Matter Plaza fame now basically puts people to head these new governments, Jamal, these new agencies to do violence interruption that are her lackeys, who have no interest in pushing forward these different programs outside of the police because she said, no, I'm for police, I'm going to increase the police budget. But if your system is completely rotted with characters who then just take these programs over, they've completely broken these programs. The violence interruption programs are predicated on there being a divide between the violence interrupters, either returning citizens, formerly gang members, people who grew up in these neighborhoods, and the police. So people know that they aren't the police. You go to any meeting with these violence interrupters in the city, and the police and them are sitting right next to each other. She's broken the program. And so, Jamal, accountability is so important, as well as basically understanding that these things are so deeply rooted in our society that it's just much more difficult than any amount of money, any amount of legislation, that it has to be so multifaceted.
Oh, man, I love that you said that. Because cops kill 1,000 people a year? And then you get 2013 to 2019, you had 99% of them not charged, not even, resulting in no crimes. That's extraordinary. I mean, even if you get rid of 500 of those, you still have 500 deaths. You know what I mean? Like it goes deep, or it's ingrained deep in our society. Jamal, I am curious, getting to Bob's point, this notion of accountability, what does that look like in trying to have, because I think the issue that people talk about when they say defund the police is not the material of it, it's the optics of it. And it's the politics that you could see right now, Donald Trump basically running with. I'm going to put more money into the police. The Democratic Party is saying get rid of cops. How do you fight that? How do you contest that? And how do you make sure that people get on a gut level or on a real level that, look, we're not talking about defunding the police. We're talking about this is fundamentally broken. And not just how do you get that across? How do you win that argument?
That's a great question. And once again, all of this has to be examined on a micro level. This is extremely comprehensive, what is happening right here. There are so many layers. And I'm going to give you a story, and this is all relative. Someone told me this, that there was in Ferguson, prior to the Mike Brown murder, a woman, she went to Ferguson because there was complaints about the police departments and abuse and police misconduct. It's still several years prior to Mike Brown being killed. And this woman went there to talk to the police department. I can't remember what her job was, but she was with the government. I believe she was a social worker talking about police sensitivity and de-escalation and so forth. And the woman sat in the front row. Some of the officers were just like paying her no attention whatsoever. And one of them actually was kind of snickering. That officer ended up being Darren Wilson. So if we're going to talk about the accountability and the training that Trump is talking about and current professional standards for use of force, what is the definition of current professional standards as of right now? That needs to be completely taken off the books, and everything needs to be completely rewritten because right now the current standard is that you can do what Chauvin did and what so many other police officers are doing, immediately going for a person's neck, their jugular vein, and so forth. That's what these officers are being told via not being held accountable. Not what they're actually trained, but they're being told that this is okay to do because, like you said, 99% of them get off. It's only about 1,000 murders by police or killings by police every year, and 99% of them are getting off. Then the message is that you can do whatever you need to do, and it's going to be okay because we're going to back you. So what's going to happen is you're going to have to basically take down or remove all the amount of power that police unions have, because that's one of the biggest issues that we have right now with holding police accountable, is that the police unions are so strong, and because they're contributing to so many political campaigns, they can do the things that they do, that you have police chiefs that I have been on panel discussions with who've admitted that they have gotten rid of the so-called bad apples. They know they exist, and fired them immediately, only to see them right back on the job less than a month or a month and a half later. So what do we do about that? The police unions, the current structure in which they exist, and I'm not against unions, but the current structure in which the police unions exist, the FOP and others, they can't be that powerful.
Real quick, just to interrupt that for the moment. Is it the police unions? I agree with you in part. But is it also that mayors and governors basically depend their lives on those cops? And that they may, at 3 a.m. between them and their God, might think that one day that cop won't be there if these guys are pushing through legislation that makes those cops upset? Or is that too conspiratorial?
Right, so let's just be honest about that. That's a perfect point. Washington, D.C. here, Mayor Muriel Bowser, and I'm not saying this to criticize her, I'm being honest about this. Her home, she has police officers sitting out there daily. The same police officers that you're going to have to either hold accountable or criticize and so forth. So it's kind of one of those things where, okay, how do I hold the protection for me accountable for the misconduct? Because now, do I worry about them not protecting me? And these officers know that. So, it's like, I got a personal bodyguard that I have to be careful. It's like, I don't want to bite the hand that protects me.
Yeah.
That's the purpose.
Speaking of the police, there's no way, at least I don't think, to talk about cops without going into the perspective that basically fell down from the legislative branch, meaning one Joe Biden. I would recommend to anybody that is listening to the show or that is considering voting for Joe Biden to listen to that crime bill speech, where he talks about, putting people on death row, and he's taunting the president like, we gave you this power to put people on death row and you weren't using it appropriately. He goes into this crack cocaine stuff. I mean, it's utterly obscene. So Joe Biden, who is now trying to, the king of blacks, is basically caught talking about MLK, Martin Luther King, and he makes this quote or make this statement about the George Floyd and Martin Luther King, and it is I'm gonna let you hear it, and you give me your comments on what you think about this particular quote. Let's hear the clip.
But even Dr. King's assassination did not have the worldwide impact that George Floyd's death did.
Is that true? I mean, like I hear that, and I want to ridicule Joe Biden, but is that statement true? And is that statement unhinged in a way. I mean, Joe Biden is still lying about being a part of the civil rights movement, which I find is utterly grotesque. But to make this statement about Floyd and King, for some reason, it rubs me the wrong way. What's your perspective of this?
So I actually just was watching that clip about half an hour again, and I was sitting there thinking about this. It's like, well, first of all, Biden is doing what a lot of Democrats do, and I'm not a Democrat or Republican, by the way, but he's pandering to the black community. And you just brought up his record and his rhetoric back in the 80s and 90s on policing and crime and so forth, in particular in the black community. But with that particular statement, that is almost the opposite of what Trump is doing, and referencing King and comparing King's assassination and death to what happened to George Floyd. First of all, there's two totally different eras. Number one, two totally different circumstances, and what I mean by that is that George Floyd was another human being. He wasn't an activist. He wasn't a leader, and of any nature whatsoever. And so that's why so many people were able to relate, because it wasn't just about George Floyd's death. It was about his death being like the last needle to break the camel's back, especially, as I said, under the circumstances in which the whole world is watching. Had that situation, the current stance that we are in right now with the COVID and everything happened, and had that been back in 68 when King was assassinated, I think it would have been way more. You can't compare the two. The world is different now. Technology has visually united the world in a way that Dr. King had in his era back in the civil rights movement. They had nothing close to that. The rest of the world had to take whatever the United States press gave them to react. So it's not even fair to compare the two. Is there more protests going on from everybody? Absolutely. Including people of all races and going around all around the world, all the countries? Absolutely. But that is because of social media. That is because of technology and everyone having cell phones, and everyone can see instantly right then and there what happened, and that we did not have that back in the 60s. So it's not even fair to compare the two.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Anything that happens now happens everywhere around the world. It's like you have a cell phone, you can take pictures of it and everything else. There's another, you can call it a viral sensation that's been taking place. I watched in the UK as they took the statue and chucked it into the water. And then a couple of days later, you can see statues coming down in the United States, people saying, hey, that's a great idea. And my hometown took the Christopher Columbus statue, chucked it into the river. And you have various statues. I think there was one in Minneapolis or Minnesota or something to that effect. Or, I'm sorry, St. Paul, Minnesota, I believe. It's been taking place all across the United States. The statue fell on them, they were injured. What do you think about this? There's a bit of consternation about this. The New York Times ran a piece saying that basically, in order to take down Trump, you have to take down white supremacy. Well, but he was using that in the context of taking down those statues. What do you think about this? Yay, nay, or somewhere in between?
Well, first of all, I've been calling for the removal of all, not just Confederate statues, but statues of racists, xenophobes, sexists, anything that exists out there. That includes signage. Several years ago, we were bringing to light the fact that right there in Virginia, Arlington and Alexandria, you have Jefferson Davis Highway. You have Route 50 Lee Highway, named after Robert E. Lee. Yes, and these are streets that are constantly reminding us, for anyone who was aware of American Civil War history and slave history, constantly reminding us of basically what I call my enemy.
I agree with you on this. But what I'm getting at is the uprising of human beings, ripping them down. Like, I agree with you that they should be removed. I think the consternation comes in that the public says, yeah, we're going to rip that down. It's time to do it. It's time for us to grow as a society. Look, it malforms us, right? Like, I lived in Richmond, Virginia. Like you said, Robert E. Lee Highway, I go up and down Monument Avenue like every other day. Never once doesn't process to me that these people were terrorists. So I agree with you with that part. I am getting to the social, the indignation that causes people to rip them down. Are they correct in it? I think that's the more interesting question.
Well, it's a good question. I think where we are is that people have asked politely, they've gone to the channels properly to remove certain things, and nothing has happened. I don't want to see these statues. To me, a statue of Robert E. Lee or any other civil, Confederate statue or hero, as they call them, is no different than seeing a statue of Hitler or of Stalin or what's his name, King Leopold, to me. So I'm glad to see them taking these things down. I saw some videos, some white guys trying to bring one of the statues back up out of the river.
What do you think about that, Bob? Do you think they should be pulling them down?
Yeah. What do I care? I think they should be taken down. They're probably going to help. I was just giggling to myself here. Donald Trump saying the warriors are going to stop. Washington and Jefferson had slaves too. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's get rid of them too. Like, that's fine as well. Like, who are we upholding as a country? If it is like former slave owners, is that like a cool person to like rock behind? And then Christopher Columbus, 1492. This guy's like, it's not like he's like modern history that like any of us on this planet have ever met. Let's I don't know. We got to just move forward a little bit. We have a caller on the line here. I wanted to get this caller in and get your response. DJ One Love. Chase, you're here with us on Political Misfits. Others can be too. 202-521-1320. Chase, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind today?
Hey, what's going on, y'all? Thank you for taking my call. Well, I've been thinking about this speech you guys were having earlier in the episode, really all this week. And I think I kind of fall on the side of Jamal almost. So let me just kind of explain. Like, I agree that the protesters should be demanding more than defunding the police. I agree that we should be defunding the police. But I think that there should be more demands
But Chase, let me just ask you real quick here. Why are you saying there's not more demands? In 2016, the Movement for Black Lives Matter came out with a comprehensive platform that got dragged through the mud because it had one mention of Israel not using its IDF forces to actually train with police in the America. That 6-point demand: end the war on black people, reparations, invest and divest within black communities, economic justice, community control, political power. The defund police was just the whole media apparatus, in my opinion, that just got a hold of one demand. It was easy for them to spread. It was controversial. It was clickbaity, and they ran with it. The media, we got to just be careful with, I guess, is just before we say there aren't more demands.
Yes. I'm not saying that there aren't any more demands. Thank you for correcting me there. I'm not saying that there aren't any more demands. I think that the demand for reparations should be up par with the defund police. It should be up in the media and like being pushed that way as well, in my opinion. And that's where me and Jamal kind of like fall apart, I think, because I don't think that made the argument that fixing class will kind of mitigate some of the worst aspects of race or racism. And I don't know how I feel about that, because for me, the worst aspect of racism is the racial wealth gap. And like, if that's what you're trying to fix, it's reparations. It's not like, so if that's what you mean by fixing class, then I'm with you. But if you're talking about these universal policies and things of that nature, they're not, I don't want to say they're useless, but they kind of are in this specific aspect of closing the racial wealth gap. I gave the example on this on the show once before with eliminating student loan debt. That literally closed the racial wealth gap like 1% at the median. So like these universal policies do not take into effect that we've been specifically targeted economically
Yeah, Chase, thanks for your call. Let me ask Jamal, DJ One Love. You got an extra 15 minutes with us for our next segment here. Come at me, bro. If not, I can give you the last word here.
Yeah, please stay. I hope you could stay, but yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break. You're listening to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik live in DC. We'll be back right after this.
Deshaun, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. My name is Jamal Thomas, here with the floating head on the side, Bob Schlehuber. If you guys are digging what we are putting down, definitely hit that like button, hit that share button, and definitely subscribe if you haven't already. You can call in to be a part of the show by 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. You hear that sound change? That means come at me, bro. The hardest segment on this network. This is your time. This is your moment. This is your plank second to get involved and give your particular point of view, something that you disagree with Bob and myself, or for that matter, our guests. So we have a few stories on the agenda for today that I think has grabbed us. Now, one of these has to do with the mayor of Minneapolis, who came out, walked, asked, who was contrite, and being contrite, he was asked by Black Lives Matter activists, do you support defunding the police? Now, his answer to this was no. But before he gave the answer of no, he gave a litany of things that he wanted to do, but they wanted to hear that very specific point of, do you defund the police? To which he still said, painfully, no. Now, they shamed him and booed him, and he had to take the walk of shame, going all the way, basically, away. Now, Bob went after him. And I think I laughed and agreed with Bob in the moment until I saw the clip. And after I saw the clip, my thought was, no, too much. Now, Bob, I want you to give your perspective on this before I say anything, because you brought this clip to my attention. Now, why, and maybe this gets to this whole thing of redemption. Now, you believe that it was necessary, and it was even right for them to shame him as he did that walk of shame. Explain.
They didn't. I guess it's politics. It's not personal.
Right.
So it wasn't him that they were shaming. They were shaming that position. That position was inherently calling for defunding the police. You can agree with it. You can disagree with it. You can say it's right, it's wrong. Those people, organized people that were there, the people that showed up, that had done the work, had called for it. He said, I don't agree with you. And they simply said, all right, then we disagree with you. You can leave now. I mean, imagine if he went to a meeting with a bunch of developers and he said, sorry, you're not going to be able to have this land at a cheap rate. Those developers would have shamed him by not giving him money, not promoting him, and then funding another opponent. So it just looks, it looks very visceral, because all protesters can really do, because they don't have the money, the wealth, or the electoral cloud, is to shame the guy in public, as opposed to, I don't know what developers do, just get another candidate to run against him. So it's political theater. We're in a moment of heightened attention. I thought it made for a great scene to basically say, look, you can have these positions, because he's going to have to go home and think about it. And I think that's the goal of saying defund the police. Jamal, it's not because I think everybody's going to defund the police tomorrow, but I think it's a tactical way to make people feel uncomfortable, for people to sit with it, to think about it. Maybe say, I think it should be this thing instead of this thing. We have an organization here called Stop Police Terror Project. And it was founded by Eugene Pereira, who used to be on this network. And he said, look, you're going to turn off a lot of people from coming to your meetings. They're not going to show up because they see that. And he goes, that's not the point of it. The point is to be jarring, to be agitated, to play the politics and to play theater, to basically get people to think about it. And if they revolt against it or they say, I'm not going to go to that, how dare they use that? That is the win. And so I feel like for them, the win was to make him feel uncomfortable, for other mayors to basically say, you're not going to be able to show up in these spaces and come with this kind of like, kind of on both sides thing. That's not a message around the world, because otherwise they're going to just look for an out and to play the kind of the people that are timid towards this stuff, especially white people who haven't like addressed these issues often. We're looking for any type of way to get out of our uncomfortability. Well, that cop saved my kid the one time, or that somebody broke into my house and I needed that cop. There's all of these stories about individual incidences where people are trying to find any way to excuse their feelings, and we have to put pressure on that system right now. Jamal Muhammad, host of the Love Lounge radio show and the Old School Lunch Bag Mix on Square One Radio. You continue to join us here on Political Misfits, 202-521-1320. What do you think there about the protesters shaming the mayor of Minneapolis?
Yeah.
Well, I have to agree with you, Bob. I mean, that's what they're there for. Once again, we're talking about the circumstances here. They're against the police department, and many people in their minds is to totally get rid of it. So if he says he's against defunding it, in the minds of those protesters right then and there, they're not going to tolerate, as you said, playing on both sides of this thing. For right now, they're dealing with their emotions, their anger, their frustration. They want to see this all gone. Now, I can say, he could say, just as a politician, that's something that we have to look into more. He could give a political answer for that.
That was the thing. He played himself in that because he goes, defund the police. You mean abolish the police? Well, I'm not for abolishing the police. He simply said, defund the police. Sure, we'll take $1 million from the police this year and give it to social programs. I thought he played himself tomorrow. That's why I didn't feel bad for him, because he actually took the question to like way more extreme to clarify and find details. Where it's like, just say right, the thing, like kind of slide away. We have a caller here, Jamal. I want to get your thoughts on this, but let's get this caller here quickly. Yeah. Malik, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing? It's Malik.
Malik, what's up, man? Appreciate you.
I caught the tail end of Jamal's comments on black nationalism, and the gist of it I got was that, I could be wrong, and please correct me, Jamal. Was that you were it wasn't necessarily viable for black nationalism is not necessarily viable, or African internationalism, and the connection between African people as a nation?
No. Let me explain. This kind of gets to the whole thing of like feminism. It's like, what does it mean? And so when I think of black nationalism, it depends on what you mean, right? If you mean that African Americans in this country needs to start thinking of themselves to some degree with a certain degree of political intent that goes beyond just 90% Democrat, then yes, I agree with you. If you're thinking of it in terms of this kind of exclusionary way, like the NOA, like the Nation of Islam, then yeah, at that point I think it gets so overwrought. And maybe this is my own framing. I'm thinking of this in terms of the conversations that were taking place between James Baldwin and Malcolm X, those debates. I was on the side of Baldwin in that debate. So, but go ahead, if that makes it any more clear.
Okay, well, let me interject on that and kind of give folks some clarity, because within the black community, there's always there's always been element. There's, whether it's the Republic of New Africa, whether it's revolutionary black nationalism and African internationalism, that see African people in America as a separate and distinct nation. And before the process of integration, that's largely how we operated. And some would say that because we operated in that sense, we had a great deal more self-determination. And I'm sure we're all aware of the loss of wealth of African people in America since since the late 60s, and the damage to our level of education since we've been so-called integrated. So I think a lot of times when people attack black nationalism or African internationalism and black people seeing themselves as a separate entity from the United States and from American society itself, I think a lot of times it's because people didn't grow up within the revolutionary movements within America. And I think you might want to reflect on that, because it may not be part of your personal experience, which is why your politics are informed by that position.
No, that's true. I mean, but I think you're taking it as an absolute of right or wrong. That's not an absolute or right or wrong. It's just basically what you're trying to accomplish, right? And in this case, what are you trying to accomplish with that particular political position matters infinitely. So when you're taking a political position like that, what are you exactly trying to accomplish?
We're trying to accomplish Black self-determination, which our movement evolved into a movement for Black power. And Black power, it was not just simple sloganeering. Black power means that we govern to a degree our own communities. And to touch on the thing of funding the police, I'm sure you're aware that the Black Panther Party and former members of the Black Panther Party released a letter recently and calling for, we have always called for greater community control of the police department. The ability to hire and fire, the ability to make sure that the police that patrolled our communities were actually from the community. That is a part of self-determination, being able to decide those things.
I understand that, but that African Americans make up 12% of this country. Like, I get the notion of Black determination, but I don't know what that means in the context of the United States. African Americans are sparse, spread out all throughout this country. Like, I get this notion of controlling the police, fair enough. I get this notion of defunding the police, fair enough. But if you're asking me to think that I can really get my hands on and get my hands around, that I could specifically think of in terms of policy, I look at the notion that African Americans, after spending all of this time in regards to this country, building this country up over the last 400 years, has a gap from 176,000 to 18,000. That number is abominable. And so I look at that and said that needs to be corrected. Now, whether you want to correct that through reparations, whether you want to correct that through some kind of federal jobs, I don't care. I think that needs to be corrected. And then we have this other, but I don't think those conversations are indistinct from one another entirely. I just don't entirely buy, I don't know what that means of Black determination and Black power in the context of having control of various communities when those communities are all throughout the United States. I look at the key thing, get rid of the wealth inequality, and getting rid of that wealth inequality has some level of social fairness and social evening that's associated with that is just not there when you have, okay, I think you're Black, or for that matter, Black power, and then you still have those communities impoverished. I mean, am I wrong?
Let's hear it. Yeah. No, Malik, thank you for the call. Let's get to our guest here, Jamal Muhammad. Malik, thank you again. Always give us a call, 202-521-1320. Jamal Muhammad, what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit off topic, but I don't know. I mean, man, there's a lot that needs to be discussed within the Black community. Our identity, what do we call ourselves? What do we associate ourselves with? For a whole nother show, I could talk about how inclusion versus segregation and how it has impacted us, the wealth gap, funding for the Black community from back in the 60s when there was actually, they were fighting for rights to get more wealth, for equity for our schools before segregation was ended. There's a lot that needs to be discussed within the Black community that we have not been able to discuss because we're too busy having knees on our neck, to be quite honest with you, literally and metaphorically speaking. So like I said, Bob, that's something for a whole nother show, man. I could go so deep into that. I'm talking about powernomics from like Dr. Claude Anderson type of deep, on identity of the Black community.
Yeah. That's fair.
I mean, it's powerful. It's powerful stuff. And like I think you said, I mean, when you have to deal with policing every day, getting that paycheck, it makes it difficult. And we're not making progress really. It's as much as again, I'm in a cynical space where it's like, Jamal, I completely agree with you. Yes, address economics. I completely agree with other people. Address police brutality. But until we actually start making big gains, it seems like it's a kind of a pointless conversation in many ways. Obviously, one to be had, but when do we actually get to that work? And I think that's a huge challenge that we have to be mindful that just because we're protesting, just because people are paying attention, it in new ways that doesn't necessarily change the circumstances. This is our time come at me bro segment here. I had to come at one of my least favorite bros out there, Pete Carroll. Folks may not know him. Pete Carroll used to be the coach of the USC Trojans there at the University of Southern Carolina for their football team. And then he went to the National Football League to the Seattle Seahawks. Pete Carroll had put out a press release regarding Colin Kaepernick, the famed NFL take a knee during the national anthem player who kicked off in many ways a kind of a new energy to the Black Lives Matter and this conversation around police brutality. Carroll said in a press release, it is clear now that Kaepernick was on the right point with what he was protesting. Carroll said he was right on it. He was right on the topics about police brutality and equality, and he was right on the subject matter at the time. That's so obvious now, where maybe all of the flack that flew about not honoring the flag and all of the other things that were not even a part of demonstrations or what his intent was at all, that was just skewed the whole discussion. I don't think that's around now. It's different at this time frame. I just, whatever. It's like, I don't really know what to do with it. If you want to apologize, cool. Pete Carroll, this just shows white male supremacy. The guy basically causes all sorts of problems at USC, was paying players under the table. They got charged. They had to basically forfeit a title game. And he has all these like sanctions coming, and he gets to quit his job before he gets in any trouble and gets promoted to coach in the National Football League. He then is part in 2017 of the blackballs Colin Kaepernick along with the rest of the league. Colin Kaepernick still does not have a job. Colin Kaepernick doesn't have a job in 2019, 2018, 2017. And as much as they kind of pulled him around, he basically has no job. And so here Pete Carroll is still with a job, blackballing a black football player, now saying, oh, you know what? I was wrong. Well, where's the justice in that? What does Colin Kaepernick feel better because Pete Carroll, this white football player, white football coach, basically said, "Oh, now you're right." 3 years later, for me, it's like, how do we do this, Jamal Muhammad? How do we reconcile? I want my fellow white folks to like wake up to it and apologize and reconcile with what has taken place. But at some point, we have to get back to the point. Apologies are only part of it, and this is like for reparations for me. It's like, yeah, it's an apology, it's a recognition, and then it's closing that economic wealth gap. It's part of a larger process. So is Pete Carroll going to hire Colin Kaepernick to be on the Seahawks next year? Is he? I mean, what's kind of the next step? And so this is kind of why I just don't really care too much about it. DJ One Love, we have a few callers lined up here. Give us a 30-second response there on your thoughts on Pete Carroll.
Hey, Bob, you did it already. You exposed it. That's what needs to be done is the hypocrisy of such things like Pete Carroll. Okay? We saw what happened with USC, and it's ironically, Reggie Bush just got allowed to be reinstated to being back to USC. Hire Kaepernick if you feel so sorry, if you say that you got it wrong. Hire him, put him on your team, and I think I'll walk away from him and sort of forgive him, plain and simple.
Yeah, DJ One Love, I'm going to let you get out of here. We got a few callers backed up here. I did want to see if you wanted to take my $20 prop bet. Does the quarterback, the New Orleans Saints quarterback, Drew Brees, does he take a knee along with the rest of the NFL, specifically Drew Brees, $20, does he take a knee on opening day if there is a opening day?
No.
You say no.
I think he will. I think, honestly, if every other teammate does it, I think he does.
All right, we'll see there. $20. I'll figure out the bet. We'll shake handshake or elbow touch offline to lock that in. That was DJ One Love. DJ One Love, where can people find more of your work online?
So go to square1radio.com. So that's www.square, the word square, the number one, and radio.com. You can check me out on Wednesdays from noon till 2 o'clock for my old lunch bag mix. And my Love Lounge radio is something that I do probably quarterly. I announce that to people. Go to thelovelounge.com. That's TheLovelounge.com.
Appreciate it very much. We have a few other callers we want to get in here. About 30 seconds per caller so we can get a few more stories before we get out of here for the week. Allie, you're up first. What's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing? Well, I mean, there's so much you talked about. I guess I heard the question asked that they didn't understand what black empowerment looked like. I don't know who said that, but basically, I mean, there was a time when black and whites were segregated. And blacks had their own neighborhoods, they had their own shops, they had their own football teams, they had their own basketball teams, and they were considered very prosperous. But it only became a problem when of these black neighborhoods and these black areas started to exceed white. And that did happen at one time. When we talk about black inequality, we're basically talking about a system that was engineered. It didn't happen just because of the lie of supremacy. I'd like to say that right off the bat. White supremacy is a lie. If you're going to use the term white supremacy, is a lie of white supremacy, because that's all it is. It's an accepted lie. So, I mean, in terms of what black empowerment looks like, I don't see a problem with segregating the two people again and offering them their own policing, their own management of government. You know, the Nation of Islam has put that forward for many years. And the Nation of Islam is as quiet as it's kept, and no one likes to talk about it, has been since the 1930s one of the most strongest black organizations around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Really appreciate it. That's fantastic points. I'm happy to always amend my language to be more honest. So I appreciate you acknowledging that. Let's get Stedman in here, and then Jamal, we'll get your thoughts from there. Stedman, thank you as always for being one of our favorite regular callers. What's on your mind today?
Hey, so listening to like the class solidarity stuff that Jamal normally talks about, and I know you guys, you're on YouTube, and I know you've probably seen some like conservative YouTube or conservative comment sections. I mean, or just in general. And one of the things like that I've had to come to terms with is I don't really want class solidarity with these people. And by these people, I mean like racist white people, or you know, who have no interest in educating themselves, who have no interest in understanding the situation at hand. Like, I don't have any interest in having any solidarity with you. If Trump's election is going to destroy them sooner, because black people are already destroyed in America. Like, the conversation is about, even with like black power or black empowerment reparations, like, we're the bottom. You know, we're the bottom. We don't have wealth. We don't have opportunity, like, as a group. There are some one-offs where you have some people who have finances, but a lot of those people historically, statistically, are boomers. So they've been able to make a lot of gains through affirmative action and a lot of like direct civil rights act moves, you know, from the government. And it's just like that race car driver. You know, I don't support the Confederate flag, but I want people to have the right to do it. That's fine, dog. So if Trump's election is going to continue to take wealth from those people and opportunity over time, and it's going to calcify that wealth in the hands of the few, if it's Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, black people don't have wealth. So we don't have anything else we can really lose. They can come in our houses and kill us. They can kill us in our cars. They can kill us in the store. They can kill us if we have a gun, even though we're registered to have guns. They can kill us if we're the wrong person. So you can't do anything else to us. They put us in chains. They put us in prison at a higher rate, which is slavery. So it's like, I have no interest in saving those people anymore. I don't want to educate those people. I don't want to deal with them. I just want them to hurry up and lose everything that they have, what little pittance of things they have now, so that they can see that all this time that the people in charge have been playing a game on them too. Because I can recognize that race is really a social construct, but I cannot completely disregard the impact that race has on black people, on people like me, on my family, on my aunt, on my children. And so, like, that's just my gripe. You know, it's not about anybody specifically. It's just like the moment. I don't have any interest in the Drew Brees, Pete Carroll, none of them. Like, you know, they have money, so it's different. But I just have no interest in the poor, white, uneducated individual. I have no interest building a coalition with.
Stephen, thank you as always for your call. Really powerful, greatly appreciated. Jamal Thomas, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, a lot to unpack between those two callers.
No, I accept that as honest. I mean, how can I disagree with that? Like, I mean, if don't misunderstand me. I guess if there's any point of disagreement, it's with the second caller, the segregation thing. I think that's going backwards. But if we're making this argument about, look, I think basically the caller is getting at, you are being screwed over, and it's not just blacks. Like, so, and like, if Trump hurries that process of whites realizing, oh right, he's taken it all. They weren't lying when they said he's taken it all. That's his point. Like, I can look at this. For the last 3 months, Jeff Bezos gained $51 billion in wealth. Zuckerberg, $34 billion. Buffett, $29 billion. Walton, $26 billion. Gates, $25 billion. Koch brothers, $17 billion. Page, $17 billion. Look, these are people who are making billions of dollars while 40 million people are out of a job. Do you think that's fair? And who do you think he's taking the money from? That's the point that the caller is trying to make to you. Cops kill 1,000 people a year. We make up 13% of this population, even when it's disproportionate. You're talking about like 24%. That's a large number of white people dying. Whites make up the majority of the people on welfare. If you ask a random white person, they would say blacks. They would be wrong. If you ask people what's the wealth skew, they would be wrong. It is monstrous. His point that he's trying to drill home, and the aggravation that African Americans have on this point, is that I know you think we're trying to take your cup of coffee. We're not. It's you who are being screwed over with this context of race as if the boogeyman is the black person. I'm sorry. You are being screwed over by your own. That's his point, Bob. At least that's the way I take his point to be. And his point is amply correct.
Yeah, we'll head out to America, Jamal. Get a station wagon and go to educate those poor white folks on what's needing to be done next. I mean, that's the question, right? It's like, how do you reach those people? How do you shake them? How do you get them to see that? And I guess it's just so conditioned into certain people's brains that they are the supremic race, that they are God's gift to this earth, that everything is here for them. Everything they've done was fought hard for. It's quite terrifying. I mean, God, it's sickening too. There was a Black Lives Matter protest. I don't remember where it was. But they literally had two white guys mocking the killing of George Floyd. Like, one guy was playing Chauvin, the cop, and basically had his knee on the guy's back, and they were laughing and screaming at protesters as they went by them. I mean, it's an incredible sickness. It's a mental health issue. And I was telling somebody the other day that, look, if you're an oppressor in a society, there's nothing healthy about that. You have a mental illness to think you're different than, better than, and should have more privileges and opportunities than another person. Based on what? Based on what? And I just think that's remarkable. I want to make a hard pivot here just to give a shout out to our friends at the Gray Zone, who are under attack basically by Wikipedia, Jamar. I think you saw this story here. The Gray Zone adding to a blacklist of depreciated sources that includes notorious tabloids as well as the right-wing and left-wing media organizations, among them Telesur, Mint Press, InfoWars, Breitbart, and others. Basically, long story short here is if you go to the Wikipedia page for Gray Zone, there's no links allowed to Gray Zone, whereas Breitbart, Daily Caller, and other sources have description pages on the site. Makes you wonder why the site is so keen on cutting people off from the Gray Zone entirely. Gray Zone claims that in its more than 4 years of existence, it has never had to issue a major correction or retract a story, and that its censorship is purely political. It says the blacklist at Wikipedia was initiated by Wikipedia editors who identify as Venezuelans and openly support the country's right-wing, U.S.-backed opposition. It's an interesting story if you get to know others at the Gray Zone. Anna Power&Pill, Ben Norden, Aaron Mate, Max Blumenthal. So often, Jamar, like their Wikipedias will be changed, and it's just like one person that's clearly not one person, but like a cobble of several people. But again, it's just like, is there any objectivity left out there? And if everything is politics nowadays, basic places like Wikipedia, which have become like the number one stop for most like undergrads to find information, this is incredibly dangerous.
That's unfortunate.
Only Max has a page. These other journalists, they don't have pages themselves, and so it's just like deplatforming so many of these other journalists.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, and if they're going to Wikipedia for information, honestly, I mean, Max is always attacked. You can rewrite the page and everything else. I forget the guy's name who goes in and re-edits and all of this other stuff. No, these guys are horrendous. Wikipedia is not the source of that information like that. And by the way, oftentimes what you would end up having are something like Facebook or Twitter taking down various sites, let's say saying with Palestinians, or for that matter, even with the Venezuela thing when it was taking place. They decided to play politics, decided to take a side. And that's how it was on the United States side. So,
yeah. Well, we need to get out of here tomorrow, Thomas. I'm taking the side of a weekend break. I hope everyone gets a good rest in, heads down to the protest. Make sure you share those photos. Tag us, Sputnik Misfits. Hopefully we'll have a robust show on Monday, hearing all of your stories from protests across the country. Big shout out to our guests today, Christine Hendricks, Jamal DJ One Love Muhammad, and Dan Kovalik. Big thank you to Ryan, Dimitri, Andre, and Saul, and the entire Sputnik News team. Big thank you, as always, to our fantastic producer, Michelle Whitty. On behalf of myself, Bob Schleber, and Jamal Thomas, thank you for listening. Now get back to organizing.
Guys, as always, I really do appreciate you joining us for the show today. That will end the weekend. Let's see. Yeah, that's going to end the weekend. Now, Let's see. I'm calling. I can't get through. Reefy00. Reefy, I'm sorry that you can't get through. We had a lot of callers for today, and the engineers might have just been occupied in trying to get everything together. But, guys, thank you. Appreciate it. You guys will see me today, maybe tonight. I have a doctor's appointment, so that might not necessarily go until this evening. But you will see me later today. Like, share, and of course, always subscribe.